Honestly, you've started me off because it makes me angry because it is bullshit and they are selling bullshit to people.
It's important, though, to not be in denial.
Honesty is really important. Yeah. I got made CEO of a real dog of a business. The business was so obviously a shitty business that we
pretend.
Leadership is about imposing yourself on events, not allowing events to control you. Yeah. It's about understanding what's within your control and imposing yourself on those factors. And the way you do that is you take decisions. If we could choose one thing, just one thing, to be the best at, what would it be? And the answer to the question was...
Hello and welcome back to the Courageous Leaders podcast, brought to you by the Change Creators, where we strengthen leadership teams, creating environments where people and profits can grow together. I'm your host, Joanna House, and on today's show, we have the wonderful Chris Hirst. Chris is a leadership expert, award-winning author of No Bullshit Leadership, and former global CEO of Havas Creative. Known for fixing broken businesses and leading high-performance teams, his new book, Indispensable, is out this June from Macmillan. So let's get started. Chris, welcome to the show. It's an honour to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And as you know, I like to start off with finding out what has been a courageous moment for you.
I think probably the moment I look at as being the inflection point, if you like, in my career was a point when I first got made CEO. I got made CEO of a real dog of a business. And it's quite a long story how I ended up at that point. But it was a business that was generally considered to be unfixable. Wow. That was, I'd say, the industry consensus. And it wasn't necessarily an opinion I disagreed with. So that was a turning point. And I suppose it was courageous. Maybe it was foolhardy. But the only great thing about the fact that the business was considered unfixable was I felt like perhaps I don't have a lot to lose here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a safety net.
Yeah, well, I mean, with hindsight, although all these things would sound, all these things sound logical and fine with hindsight, don't they? But when you're there in it, they don't, because you don't know how the story ends.
Yeah. But did you have, because it's quite interesting then, for you to take on that role, were you promoted within or did you join it?
I'd been hired. The short version of that is I'd been hired 6 years before as part of a team to fix that business. We'd failed. The people that I'd been hired with had gone for various reasons, which in some instances are fascinating stories in themselves. That's for another day. But I'd stayed. And if you're hired as part of the solution, but 6 years later, you're still there, still doing the same job as the managing director, so I was the number two, and the business hasn't changed, you've become part of the problem as well. And so yes, I was promoted from within, and I think perhaps I got a little bit lucky actually in that regard, or unlucky depending on how it felt at the time. But yes, I was an internal promotion, and that came with good and bad things. Good, I understood the problem very well, but bad, I was institutionalized.
Yeah, because I'm really curious, what did it then take? Because number one, going from MD to CEO is quite a jump, quite a leap anyway.
I think it's a huge jump, actually.
And then to go, right, I'm now taking this CEO position where I haven't got 6 years of showing that I can definitely change it.
No,
and everyone's saying,
I had 6 years of showing I couldn't
do it. So what did it take for you within to go, this is then how I'm going to approach it, this is how I need to shift my mindset and how I need to show up differently? So
the bit of the story that I missed out is that I went to do the advanced management program at Harvard for 8 weeks.
Okay.
As the sort of bridge between those 2 points. And that, without question, changed my life. But it didn't change my life because I went and learnt, business strategy and stuff like that. It changed my life because I went on that course feeling like a failure, and objectively, there was some truth in that. And sat there for 8 weeks in Boston, and this is before social media and stuff like that. So you actually could kind of separate yourself a little bit then. And I remember sitting in that room with another 120 people and thinking, I can be whoever I want to be in this room. Nobody knows anything about me. I can be anybody I want. And it was an astonishing kind of Damascene experience, because then you think, well, if I can be anybody I want inside this room, I can be anybody I want outside this room. Mm-hmm. Now, it's obviously not entirely true, but even if it's partly true, it's liberating, right? And it really changed my life. And the second thing I learned was it's a case study based learning process. And so we studied successful business leaders, big name people. And I remember thinking, these people would fix our business in an afternoon. You know, they'd be like, what, there's 200 people? Well, hang on a minute, I've got the real job to do over here. I'll come and fix it. Now, I actually don't think that's true, because what I've learned since is bigger doesn't necessarily mean more difficult. Yeah. But again, just in terms of a mental shift, I suppose it helped me shed some baggage and gave me confidence, but like real times 10 confidence.
Yeah. And did you fix it?
Yeah, we fixed it.
Brilliant.
We transformed our business in 3 years. So it was great. I had an agency called Grey. And we went from being like a genuinely a shitty business. Shrinking, nobody wanted to work for us. The work was crap. We made no money. And in three and a half years, we doubled in size. We'd quadrupled the profits. We were agency of the year. It was really the turning point for my career. And it taught me, I would say, the 3 years of that CEO role and the 3 years before that CEO role. So if you like the how not to do it, then perhaps a case study of how to do it, taught me just about everything I believe now, not just about leadership, but about culture, about careers, and about business and people, frankly, myself.
Yes, you've got to put a mirror up, haven't you? You've got to kind of...
You do. I don't know whether I'm very good at that.
Okay.
But you do have to try to.
Yeah. So I know there'd be some people listening to this going, oh my word, what did you do? Because my business is not going how I want to right now. We're in trouble. What did you do? If it was just to pass on 1 to 3 pieces of key advice that someone could take away to go, look, just look at this differently or think like this, what would you share?
So I can be very clear about this. It's difficult, but it's not complicated. I can tell you what we did, and I don't think it will amaze anybody, but I will also tell you, because in my next job, I ran 100 businesses, each with their own CEO, and I would tell them this, and most people didn't do it.
Okay.
So what I think we asked ourselves, I remember very clearly, we sat and had a conversation and as a leadership team, and we said to ourselves, what are we the best at right now? Now, this was an easy question to answer. Nothing. We were not the best at anything. We were probably okay at a few things, but nothing. And we weren't in denial. We couldn't be.
It's important, though, to not be in denial and be honest.
Honesty is really important. But like I say, the business was so obviously a shitty business that we'd have had to. And it was only us there, you know, we weren't talking to the press. It was just us in the room. So that's not a difficult question to answer. But the useful question we then asked was, if we could choose one thing, just one thing, to be the best at, what would it be? And I would say every business should ask itself that question, and even every team. Because all businesses are made up of teams. If you run a team right now, ask yourself, what one thing, if we could choose anything, what to be the best at, what would it be? And we asked ourselves that question. And the answer to the question was, we want to be the best at new business. That's it. We want to be the best in London, in the world, at new business. Because my view is that business isn't about the product you make. Business is about two things. It's about, one, do you have happy customers or clients? And two, how good are you at getting new ones? If you've got happy customers, they're less likely to leave you. I mean, some still will, but they're less likely to. And if you're great at winning new clients, you're going to grow. Business's task is to grow. And we were absolutely, totally committed to it. Now, I go and say that, like I said, I've had 100 agency CEOs work for me, and I'd go and talk to them about this, and they'd look at me like I was mad. They'd go, well, I mean, of course we need to be good at new business. But the thing that people don't do is they don't commit. And we absolutely committed. We were so all in. And really that's about prioritization. But the thing people don't do when it comes to prioritization is they don't stop doing stuff. They keep doing everything.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We said, no, we're serious about this. And that means we are going to have to compromise in other areas. And that's what we did. And once you're a growing business, guess what? You have more confidence. Your bosses get off your back. You can invest in better talent. You can invest in the infrastructure. You can, it was a creative agency. So we can spend a little bit more time maybe on the briefs that we're excited by. And guess what? If we're growing, it means we have more clients. So we have more briefs to work on. Yeah. So it is without question the thing that I think all agencies, not just creative agencies.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode. Did you enjoy being a CEO?
I loved it.
What was the most thing you loved about it?
I think the thing I loved was the problem solving. I enjoyed the pressure, I enjoyed the people, and I enjoyed solving problems. I'm reasonably aware these days of the things I'm good at and the things I'm not. And one of the things, and I think that's one of the things I'm good at, if that makes sense. And I'm not threatened by people who are better than me at stuff. And I think a lot of people are. Yeah. By the way, I have plenty of other things that this doesn't make me a better person. This just makes me perhaps a slightly, this allows me to be a successful CEO. I've got plenty of demons and all that sort of stuff on my shoulder. And I think the other thing that I'm good at is taking complicated situations and simplifying them and making them clear. Yeah. And I think that's a really useful thing to be able to do if you are in any form of leadership position, whether you be a CEO or leading a team or what have you, because business at all levels is like drinking from a fire hydrant. Okay, you just have way more tasks you're being presented with than you can possibly do. And the challenge is, how do I identify the tasks that are going to be most useful to us? As you know, how can identify the places we can spend our time most effectively and then commit to it. Yeah. I'm happy to be unpopular.
There's two things listening to that. Is our wonderful quote when I worked with John Asraf was, "Are you interested or are you committed?" And it was a really specialized, what do you do? Because if you're just interested in something, are you really going to commit? But if you're committed, you're going to go all in. So I might be interested in learning Spanish, but am I really committed to learning Spanish? And I think that thing of just testing, are you all in? Is this right for you or not?
I love the phrase "all in." I met somebody the other day, and they wanted some career advice, and they were sort of freelancing at various places because they weren't quite exactly in the place they wanted to be. They were very clear where they wanted to be, but they were sort of, had to work while they waited to get to that spot. And my advice to them was, this isn't going to happen if that's your approach. You have to, if you're going to progress in your career, you have to be all in. So don't just float around, because it's dead time. So find somewhere and be all in until you're all out. Right? Nice. Because if you're all in, you will learn. And the things that will get you closer towards your dream job is not your passion. Lots of people, everybody who has a dream job, lots of people have a passion for that dream job. Yeah. The things that get you closer to it is your experiences and skills. And the way you get those is by being really committed and saying to your boss, I'm all in. Yeah. I'm here for you. And that's how you'll progress. And that'll get you closer to it faster than drifting around waiting for, the magic opportunity to arrive.
Yeah. When's that door gonna? You've got to open it yourself.
You've got to open it yourself.
You've got to open it yourself.
Yeah.
And that leads us nicely on to your book, Indispensable.
Yep.
Brilliant book here.
Thank you.
When's the release date?
June the 26th.
Oh, so not long.
No.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
What for you then are then the two or three core things from this book that is going to help people?
I think the two things in the book. I'm really passionate about helping people fulfill their personal ambitions, whatever those might be. I'm a big believer in that we can achieve remarkable things ourselves. Frankly, if we can get out of our own way. Yep. And by the way, I'm talking to myself when I say that. Yep. And the book is about giving people the tools to do that. And I think there's one central idea that breaks into two parts in the book. And the central idea is that all of us are a blend of aptitude and attitude. So you might call it, I don't like the phrase, but you might call those hard skills and soft skills. So aptitude are the things that you put on your CV, for example. And attitude is what people look for in interviews. And my central point of the book is that what drives our careers forwards is not our hard skills, it's our soft skills. What drives our career forward is our attitude. Skills get you in the room, but attitude gets you the job, whether that be a promotion or a new job or what have you, gets you promoted. And I just don't think enough people understand not just that that's the case. Yep. I mean, you only have to do a basic search for how many hours people spend worrying about CVs. And I'm like, CVs don't get you the job. Yeah. The best they're going to get you in the door. Yeah. But also, people then don't understand the universality of that, of attitude. Or pretty well every job everywhere wants the same kind of attitudes. And so if we develop those and understand those, we don't need to go on training programs to learn them. It's just a choice. Yeah. We can be that person or not. So be it.
So what do you think's stopping people? Because you're going to just have a good attitude, show up like this, work on your character. What is getting in the way of us just having a better attitude within the workplace?
Well, I don't want to be pedantic about words, but I don't think even better is the right way to say about it. I'm not here to tell people how to behave. Okay. I'm here to say to people, if you want to have a successful career, this is how you should behave. You may not want to do that, in which case, fine. But you can't not behave that way and then complain if other people who do progress more quickly. That's my deal. Okay.
Got it.
So what gets in the way is, I think, partly people don't show up to work intentionally. Okay. So I got an absolute torrent of abuse on social media today because I posted something that said, don't show up at work as yourself. Now, I understand why this creates a reaction. But really my point was that I'm not suggesting that people, frankly, we can't be anybody but ourselves. But we need to show up as a curated version of ourselves. And this isn't that difficult because we do that all the time everywhere. Yeah. We already show up at work as a curated version of ourselves. It's just very often we show up as the wrong curated version. I'm saying show up as the right curated version. And it's a great question to ask why people don't. I think partly people don't show up with intentionality at work. And by the way, I'm not just talking when you work for other people. I'm saying that when you show up with your clients, if you run your own business, I mean, the attitudes that are the same everywhere, irrespective of where you're working.
So you think people are just going in on autopilot?
Yes, I think people turn up on autopilot, and people don't. So first of all, people turn up on autopilot. I think. I'm not naive. I mean, I talk an awful lot, and I'm very passionate about culture. So culture in every organization has a culture, and culture does have an influence over how we behave. So it's not that people are necessarily deliberately turning up in a passive-aggressive way. But even in a shitty, toxic culture, we still have agency. Yeah. We can still be conscious of how we're behaving. Yeah. And I just don't think it's high enough up on people's radar because people don't talk about it. The things we're trained to do at work, the things we talk about at work, very often are predominantly hard skill based, and yet they're not the things that drive us forwards.
It's interesting because I do a lot of work with helping people have challenging conversations. And you do notice people don't like to give feedback on someone's behaviour.
Yeah.
They'll give feedback on something that was tangible, tactical, but actually feeding back on behaviour, it becomes quite uncomfortable. And is it subjective? Is there real evidence? Do you think it's because of human nature we're not very good at having those conversations?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
But I think what's interesting, the flip side to that observation, which I think is a great observation, and again, I talk about this in the book, I'm the same. It's uncomfortable giving people feedback about behavior. But when we talk about our colleagues, dare I say gossip, and everybody does,
Everyone
right?
does, yeah.
When we gossip and talk about our colleagues, the thing we talk about is their behaviors and attitude.
100%.
100% of the time. We don't sit around and say, oh, John, he's a crappy accountant.
His
we
Excel
sit around and
skills.
say, John's an asshole, right? Or, or the flip side, a positive as well.
Yeah.
We don't sit around and say, well, Jane's a great accountant. We say, oh, Jane's great. When she turns up, I just thought things are going to get done and the warm room's up when she walks in.
Yeah.
And so even though we don't feel comfortable giving feedback on it, they are the things that we value. And if we say, pretty well everybody listening to this, if they were to write down what would their ideal colleague be like, that word cloud of those would be very, very similar.
So why aren't they doing that?
Why aren't people behaving in those ways?
No, I just kind of say that's such a simple exercise, isn't it? To go, just write down your ideal colleague to get the behavioural traits
and
that
then
you'd really love, and then be it, and then hire against that. And you kind of go, and it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you spend a lot of time as a company coming up, what are our company values? What are the behaviours to support those values? And actually just so simply who are the people we want to work with? And they're the behavioural traits. And it's actually, if we then have those as standards for how we treat each other.
Well, so my first book was called No Bullshit Leadership, and you've just summarised the essence of that book. Because there's well, first of all, I think there's a huge industry around stuff like cultures and values that make a whole load of money. It makes me honestly, you've started me off because it makes me angry because it is bullshit, and they are selling bullshit to people. Every successful culture, there's not hundreds of ways of having a great culture. There's basically one. Every successful culture has the same behaviors. Values are, I don't like talking about values not because they're wrong, but because they're difficult to do something with. Behaviors we can do something with. We understand behaviors. All cultures are defined by the same behavior. All good cultures are defined by the same behaviors. There's an infinite amount of ways to do bad cultures. And the same applies, and guess what? Those behaviors correlate very closely to what we would like in an ideal colleague. They correlate very closely to how the attitudes we should have ourselves. And guess what? They correlate very closely to the way you behave if you're a successful leader. And now I haven't, because I'm not a social scientist or something like that, and I don't have to, I haven't troubled myself too much with the question about why people don't, but I have troubled myself an awful lot with saying, if you choose to, these are the behaviors you should follow, and it'll pay off, in spades.
I just try and keep it simple.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to know, because obviously, as you said, you had 100 CEOs you were looking out for, and with all your your knowledge of leadership, and I don't know if this is in the moment you can answer this, or is it on hindsight and reflection you're going to approach this question. What did you notice with those 100 CEOs, the ones that were doing it well, who were bringing those cultures, or how did you spot a CEO, I know you're going to get it, you're not? How did you navigate that?
First of all, I am in some ways quite a transactional person. So for me, leadership's a results business. Okay. You can't be a great leader with crappy results. By definition.
With what you're leading.
Okay, so all that stuff that you and I talk a lot about, all the social media stuff, people put these big lists of adjectives up. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but if the results are crap, you're not. Now, everybody has bad months and bad years, of course, but I mean, over a prolonged period of time, that is the case. So the first thing you do is you look at what the business performance is, right? I mean, if one of the challenges with having 100 businesses you're responsible for is to work out where to spend your time. We talked about this earlier. Where do you spend your time? And so basically I triaged the businesses. So I said, where are the real crappy businesses? Where are the high-performing businesses? And then there's the rest. And so I first and foremost spent and the 80-20 rule kind of applies. So I said, well, there's probably 20 of those businesses that are strategically important to us, that we really need those businesses to be great. And if they are great, it's going to lift all boats. And then within those businesses, you look at the ones that are performing well. Well, frankly, there's plenty that aren't. So the ones that are performing well, you say, how do I help you do better? Come to me and tell me how I help, and you keep out of their way, basically. I think that's how all teams should work, in my opinion. How do I help you? Then you have to be quite, the ones that aren't, you have to be quite, potentially quite interventionist. And that boils right down to literally telling people, if necessary, how you want them to perform. You have to be, leadership's about clarity. I mean, again, another thing that I think people find very difficult about leadership, and I don't think social media helps with this, is there's so much stuff on social media about it's how important it is to be nice or kind or empathetic as a leader. And by the way, fine, but you also sometimes need to stand up and say, this is how it's going to be, and you need to follow me, or you need to do it my way. And it's a balance. You can't just be that, but you can't just be the person.
Because I still see that as kindness, isn't it? Because that clarity is that the Brené Brown stuff,
I think it is a form of kindness, but I don't disagree with that. And I think also there's empathy in there, but it's very often interpreted as by people trying to be leaders as not people in the same. So I agree with you, but I think it's the interpretation of it. So in the same way, for example, you mentioned that people find it difficult to talk about feedback about behaviors. I think a lot of people in leadership positions find it quite uncomfortable to stand up and say, no, we're doing it like this. I'm at the front. I'm in charge. I know where we're going. I know how we're going to get there. Here's where we're going. And in reality, quite a lot of people want that. They want the leaders, they want people to stand up and say with absolute certainty, this is where we're going and it's going to be great. And it might be difficult along the way, but come on.
Even if they don't agree with it, just to have a direction.
Yes. So it's a long answer to your question, but I think the reality of it is you first of all have to whittle down the number of places you're going to spend your time. And then within those, you have to work out, okay, which of these do I need to be interventionist with and which do I need to be? I mean, I think there's the front and the back version. So the leading from the back version is you guys are doing great. How do I move barriers out of the way for you? How do I help you be even better? That for me is leading from behind, if you like. Businesses that are struggling and broken, they want you out front. And this is how I want you to do it. This is where I want you to focus. And ultimately, of course, if people can't do it or won't do it, you have to change the leaders.
And that's then, I'm guessing that's when you then really got involved, just going, this isn't working.
This isn't working. We've got to get somebody else.
And would you say, are you someone who can make fast decisions like that? Or do you how many chances do you give?
I can't give you an answer to how many chances. But I think that I'm somebody who generally starts with positive intent. So I assume positive intent from people. By the way, there definitely isn't always positive intent. And I have been burnt by taking that position. But I don't have a hard and fast answer for that. I think I am good at making decisions. I'm a decisive person. Of course. And by the way, in my mind, being good at making decisions as a leader is not about a qualitative judgment on how often I get decisions right. It's about how promptly I make decisions. I'm a decisive person. I'm not afraid to make decisions. I can think of plenty of decisions I've made that have gone wrong. I can think of plenty of decisions that I wasn't quick enough. But I can't think of many where I feel like I was too quick. Even though I see myself as being quite a decisive and, I get on with it sort of person. I mean, I'm about getting on with it, and I want people around me who get on with it.
Get on with stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm listening to a lot of businesses at the moment, and a bit of a common pattern I'm seeing, the ones that are really struggling, there's no decisions being made. It's so sad to see. So again, in my first book, I repeated in every book I've written, leadership impact equals clarity multiplied by action. And the number one reason for leadership failure, and I'm not talking just about CEOs, I'm talking about if you have people in your team, you're a leader, the number one reason is action equals zero.
People, we're very good as humans at thinking. But I always say, do you know what? Until you get to action, everything else is just thinking and talking, and doesn't mean anything. Action is how stuff gets done. And what I think is interesting about action is action actually drives confidence. When you have leadership teams, so leadership teams typically will meet at regular intervals, okay? And they'll meet and they'll talk about the same things. We've all been in those teams, we've all run those teams. Every Wednesday you meet in the same room, coffees, how's everybody, how are you, a bit of banter, the agenda, same problems. And it's amazing how quickly the confidence in that team evaporates. And not only amongst themselves, but the confidence other people have in them. And it evaporates because they feel like events are controlling them. Leadership is about imposing yourself on events, not allowing events to control you.
Yeah.
It's about understanding what's within your control and imposing yourself on those factors. And the way you do that is you take decisions. So as soon as you start to take decisions, honestly, even most decisions people take are fairly prosaic decisions. They're not decisions about spending millions of dollars. But as soon as you start to do it, it's amazing how much confidence people have and how they grow as a team. And I would encourage everybody to do that. Just start making decisions. And if, when we turned around Grey, we made tons of decisions and some of them were terrible decisions. And so what we did is we just changed our mind.
Change the decision.
Just
keep making decisions.
Yeah, just make another decision. Well, that was a terrible idea, so just go back.
Yeah, as my mentor said to me, because especially when I changed career completely, he's just like, you just got to jump in the pool without the armbands.
Yeah.
Just go and you will figure out how to swim.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah. And in reality, most stuff isn't as scary as that.
No.
It isn't.
No.
You
think it is in your mind, but when you can get management of your mind and you realise, actually, I can break it down. I said to someone yesterday, don't try and eat the elephant in one sitting.
Yes.
Just break it down step by step. And that's going to help the uncertainty, the overwhelm. And I do think we love progress as human beings. So as soon as we start seeing these little micro moments of progress, it's like, that's possible.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, again, I talk about that a lot in the book. I think that one of the reasons that people feel stressed at work or even get to burnout at work is people typically ascribe it to overwork. And I'm sure, I don't want to be simplistic about it. There will be aspects of that. But a key reason that people feel stress is lack of progress. People feel like they're putting more and more and more effort in and not getting any return for themselves. And if we feel like we're getting a return, if we feel like, well, if I work, obviously it doesn't work like this, but if I work 50% harder, I get 50% closer to wherever I want to get to, then I kind of feel like that's a fair trade, right? I feel that seems reasonable. And really the book, Indispensable, is about helping people get a return for the effort they're putting in. And I think if we get a return for the effort we put in, we are less likely to feel burnt out. I can't say we're not going to feel stressed sometimes, but we can recover from the stress because we feel like we are getting something back.
And is that where the decision to do the book came from when you started? Because you see, burnout's been such a big word, obviously, since COVID and during COVID. Was that where the idea came from to do it?
No.
Okay, I'd love to know. No, I'd love to know where it did. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that specifically. It was about I wanted to help people have more successful careers. Yeah. I think a good way of, and that is a burnout and stress is a subset of that. But, I think a good way of thinking about what an effective leader does is an effective leader is good for the careers of the people that work for them. Yeah. And that's a very high bar, by the way. I mean, that's a tricky thing. So, and that's what I mean by trying to take complicated things and simplify them. You see a lot of people will write down huge long lists of adjectives to try and define what leadership is. And I'm like, well, you know what? If you're good for the careers of the people that work for you, they're going to stay with you. It's rational to stay. And if you're not, it's rational to leave. And so the book is about how it comes from my passion, I think, around helping people to fulfill their potential, because I think so much of the things that accelerate us forward or hold us back are within us all.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode. Have you fulfilled your potential?
No.
And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, so I didn't tell you I was going to ask you any of these questions.
No, you didn't. No,
Having a nice chat.
No.
Because you've mentioned demons twice. It's just curious, because this is where the courageous, and just to normalise what we all go through. Is there, what demon for you are you working on the most to kind of help you be able to reach your full potential?
I fear failure.
Okay.
And I do think that holds me back. I admire people. I was talking to you earlier about Anthony Scaramucci. For those that don't know him, some people know, some people won't. And I remember interviewing him, and I said to him, "So do you know, he's an incredibly successful person." I said, "Well, do you fear failure?" And he said, "Yeah, of course I do. Of course I fear failure, but I don't let it stop me." And I think it stops me. It doesn't completely stop me, but it slows me down. And if I had to name one thing, it would be that.
And that's what you're working on.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most common, is that fear of failure. And it does stop so many people.
Yes.
And it can catch me in my tracks as well.
And again, it's back to to stories we're telling ourselves as well. What does failure even mean?
Yeah. Or what are you making it mean?
What do you make? That's exactly. What are you making it mean? I mean, could I accurately describe to you what that looked like? No, I couldn't. I don't have a picture of what that failure is. Maybe it's a combination of what other people think.
Yeah, it's what it feels like. I think it's going to feel like it to fail.
Yeah.
The shame and...
Yeah. And also, yes, the shame. Yes, all of that. Yeah, and the lack of... the consequent lack of progress. I wouldn't say I fear a lack of progress. I fear failure, but I also... Therefore, one of the ways that manifests for me is I'm the sort of person that wants to see progress.
Yeah.
I'm about movement, and it really
can get you.
Grinds me down if I feel like I'm not.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it will resonate with a lot of people listening. And I'd love to know, before we close, your story's fantastic. 3 books, CEO, when you're told it's not fixable, going to global CEO, fantastic career path. And I know you've helped so many people. Looking back, what would be that advice you'd give to your younger self?
I think it sort of depends a bit on what age, actually. So, but if I was to give myself advice when on my first day as a CEO, let's pick that point, because we've talked about that already. I would say go faster. Okay. I would say go faster. And it, I don't think fear of failure has, it hasn't stopped me. But I think I look back and think, despite those demons, look at what we achieved, and therefore look at what we might have achieved if we'd have gone faster.
So, and do you think then it took you then to just back yourself more to be able to go faster?
Yeah, and just worry less about
let it go.
Just worry less about the. So I'll give you a real example of this. So I went for an interview for a job I didn't get. And the person interviewing me said, what is the one thing you've learned from losing your job? And I said, it's survivable. That's the thing I learned from it. And it had been for me a kind of a negative. By negative, I mean it was a motivating factor. Like not losing my job was a serious motivation to work harder, but in a sort of a negative way. It was running away from something rather than running towards something, if that makes sense. And that experience of when it did happen, the experience eventually of realizing, actually, you know what, this I can survive this is quite liberating.
I'll be okay.
Yeah. Well, I'd be okay. And I often think, well, actually, do you know what? If I did go back to being a CEO again, I'd be way better as a result. partly because I'd worry less.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you worry less, you move faster.
Yeah. It's a mantra I always had, because when I was in a bit of a dark place, the mantra I always said to me is like, I'm enough, I belong, I'm worthy, and I can handle anything that happens to me. And I just repeated that over and over and over again. It's like, I'll handle it. What's the worst thing? And that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's always, what's the worst that can happen? Do you know what? I can handle that. I'm going to do it. Let's go.
So the problem I have is I'm bad at that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so it just bounces off my kind of, psyche is hard to break through in that regard. And so it had to happen for me to believe it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I do think a lot of it is life experiences. This was seen, it's so hard, isn't it? Because we know we need to fail to become better, yet we fear the failure so much. It's a bit of a cycle.
So it is. I had this idea that we love listening to stories about, because interesting, right? It's a narrative, redemption. We love redemption stories, okay? So we love hearing about, people achieving things and then falling off and then recovering. That's how story arcs work.
Yeah.
And that's great. But everybody you ever hear telling that story is telling it with retrospect.
Oh, yeah.
You never hear from the people who didn't get the redemption, who just fell off. And they must be out there.
There must be.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
You never hear from people who are in the middle right now. Those people who are, well, actually, do you know what? This is pretty shitty right now. I'm right in the middle of it. Maybe in 2 years' time, I'm going to have a great story to tell about this. Those 6 years when I was the MD of Grey, that wasn't a great story. I thought I'd screwed my career.
Yeah.
It's only a great story because I became CEO and various things happened and the tectonic plates shifted and, we had a good outcome. And that's why I think failure's hard. Because when it's happening to you right then, you don't know what the end of the story is going to be.
Yeah, it's a really nice point. I never thought of it that way. Because I'm just thinking of one of my stories, and when I had a horrible time, I wouldn't have been able to talk about it while I was going through it.
No, because you don't know what the end of the story is.
The only thing I did have, though, was enough stories to know I could be okay. So that enough things to look ahead to go, right, if they got through this, I can keep going. But yes, I agree with
I mean, I'm not saying that therefore it's all is doom and gloom, but that's why it's so hard when you're in the middle of it.
You don't know the end.
Yeah. And but by the way, I also think perhaps some people love that. I think perhaps some people, I don't mean some people love, having a terrible time, but I mean, there's that adrenaline and that drive, and that's what, pushes us forwards. But it's tough when it's happening to you. But it's also for sure that nobody has ever achieved anything worthwhile without that happening. In fact, in the book, I say that. By the way, I do fundamentally believe that. I think we only learn through. But a primary source of our learning is through failure. I mean, we can learn from success as well, by the way, of course. But therefore, nobody ever achieved anything great without failures along the way. I mean, you never. No. And if you buy that argument, you could argue if you're running a business or a team, not only is failure an occupational hazard, but it's a prerequisite.
Yeah.
You have to say to yourselves, have we failed enough? Yeah. If we are just trundling along, and I think that goes back to those leadership teams where we meet and talk about the same things every week. Actually, we should be saying, hey, when was the last time we made a bad decision? Because maybe if we're never making bad decisions, it means we're not making enough decisions because some decisions are going to just not work out.
And we become too safe.
And we just don't move. Just don't move.
Yeah. Just in that hamster going round.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is, I think when we can embrace it, it's part of the role to push the boundary, and that's what I think comes back to the culture and the environment that supports it when that happens. Yes,
that's right. I mean, and also the reality of it is progress is a zigzag. So most decisions that you take, even at a very senior level, they don't end up being binary. They don't end up being right or wrong. They just end up being, that was a bit more how I hoped it would go, or that's a bit less how I hoped it would go. And as you say, I think of decisions as doors. You choose a door to go through, you go through it, and what's on the other side of the door? A load more doors. Yeah. That's what happens, but you've got to keep walking through them. The one thing I'd say about failure, and this was the most powerful idea I had in my head when I first became CEO. And I definitely did have this in my mind at the time. I'd been in that job for 6 years. We talked about the sort of baggage that therefore I had as a result. But the one thing I was absolutely clear about, and that we were explicit about as a team and with the company, was that we were definitely going to make mistakes, but we weren't going to make the mistakes that we'd made before.
Nice.
So I could see what we'd done, not an entire multicolour picture, but I had some very clear ideas of what we definitely weren't going to do, because I definitely knew it didn't work. Yeah. And that is the clearest example that I can think of in my career.
Thank you. It's been a joy talking with you. It's just like, think about this. You sparked lots of ideas. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Is there any final parting words you want to say, or any final message you want to reinforce?
The message I want to say to people is that I genuinely and passionately believe that depending on whether you're being glass half full or glass half empty, it is within all of us to achieve what we want to achieve. And the ways to do that don't require MBAs or qualifications. They require understandings around attitudes, and those attitudes are just how we behave around other people. And if we show up with intention, we can transform our careers literally tomorrow.
It's beautiful. On that note, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone listening, and we'll see you next week. If you've been enjoying the Courageous Leaders podcast, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us keep creating quality content and reaching more leaders like you who are ready to grow and make a real impact. We fund this podcast ourselves, so every subscription truly makes a difference and allows us to support courageous leaders like you. Thank you for being part of the journey.